In this video, we'll make this slot machine using the concepts from my past few short videos. I'll put up a link to the corresponding video whenever one of those contraptions comes up so you can get a more in-depth explanation in case you're confused. Finally, I want to give a small disclaimer. I made this build to encompass as many of my short lessons as possible so you guys can see them put to use. This does mean, however, that it isn't the most efficient way to create something like this, but I hope you will be able to understand all of the underlying principles so you can fully customize it as you want. I'll include a link to the world map and schematic in the description. First, we'll make spinning wheels using piston feed tapes. In this video, we'll make one with 3 wheels, but you can make any number once you understand how the machine works. I'm going for a 9 long feed tape, but you can make them larger if you want to modify the chances of winning or if you want more possible combinations. We delay the last piston with a 2-tick repeater to make sure the first piston is no longer extended when it tries to push. The second and third feed tape are exactly the same. We only need to make sure the signals that go to the last piston don't cross. We want to be able to read out what block is being shown to the player so we can determine the prizes. We can do this by using comparators. As you probably know, a comparator can't see the difference between, for example, a diamond block and a gold block, but they can check how full a container is. Luckily, the composter is a pushable container, so we can use a nifty little trick where we actually let every winning block correspond to a composter that we read out on the opposite end. Here I show, using similarly colored wool, where you need to place the composter that corresponds to which block. As you can see, the feed tapes I used can have up to 4 different winning blocks, but I chose to have 3, with iron being extra common. A composter can send out a signal with a strength up to 8, depending on how full it is. So that's the maximum of unique winning blocks we can have if we were to build a larger feed tape. I fill the composter that corresponds to the iron blocks for 1 level. I do this by adding compostable materials like kelp or seeds until I hear a high digging sound. It is random how many items you need to add, so listen closely. If it makes a low sound, it didn't count as a layer of compost. The same concept applies for the gold block, where I fill its composter for 2 levels and then again for the diamond block with 3 levels. I repeat this for the other feed tapes. Now let's use the signals our comparators read to generate the desired outputs. Let's go look at the payout table and see what they're trying to accomplish. There are 3 payout tiers. To make everything better to follow, I'll use some color coding. For the small payout of 3 diamonds, I'll use white wool. For the medium one of 8 diamonds, I'll use yellow wool. And for the big win, I'll use light blue wool. We'll use logic gates to calculate when those are activated. For example, the small payout is active when iron and iron and iron, or gold and gold and a random block, or a random block and gold and gold. We can calculate the other payout tiers similarly, so we need AND logic for every payout tier. I start with making 3 lines of AND gates, where each line needs 1 extra redstone power to be reached. This means that we now have essentially converted each payout tier into inputs for the desired AND gates. Let's test this by letting the feed tapes rotate a bit and see if each block gets read correctly. Everything looks in order, so let's connect all the AND gates correctly. We'll read out the outputs at the bottom so they don't interfere with the rest of the build. We can use the outputs of the AND gates as the inputs of another AND gate to essentially create a triple input AND gate with a single output, which we can use for the payouts based on having 3 blocks in a row. Meanwhile, we use the regular AND gate outputs for the payouts based on having 2 winning blocks in a row. Since 2 gold blocks in a row give the same input as 3 iron blocks in a row, we need to connect those signals to the white wool path. We do, however, read an inverted version of the AND gates, so we need to invert them once more before they reach the white wool. We repeat the same process for the other tiers. We connect the gold AND gates to another AND gate so we get a signal that turns on when we have 3 gold blocks in a row. Once again, we use double inversion to add the double diamond block signals to this path. After that, we use a final AND gate to create the jackpot signal, where 3 diamond blocks are shown at once. Before we go any further, let's look at the vertical AND gate design. Both the top and bottom signal need to be on for the output to be active. We'll use it to only activate the top signal when the wheels have stopped spinning. This way the calculated winnings will only activate their dropper for the actual final stance. For now, I'll just make a row of blocks that isn't connected to anything yet, but that way it's clear where we should bring the wool signals to. When all the wool is extended to the bottom input of the vertical AND gate, I start with making the payouts. I begin with the medium payout. Since I need 8 pulses, I'll connect the output of the AND gate to a burnout circuit without any extra stuff at the end. For the medium output, we can use a burnout circuit as well, since we just need to add a 3-tick repeater to make it spit out 3 pulses. Now I start with placing the payout droppers, which I fill up with diamonds so we can actually get prizes from the pulses. I wanted a very large jackpot, so I had to resort to using a hopper timer connected to a comparator clock to give 100 pulses. By using one regular piston instead of 2 sticky pistons, I get a hopper timer that sends the items back and forth 1 time every time it gets activated. I simply connect this to a comparator clock and fill it with 26 items, which is enough to give 100 pulses. Now that we're done with that, I test the machine once to see if I get the correct amount of diamonds for 3 iron blocks in a row. It seems to work, so now it's time to build a roof on which we'll add the redstone that makes the wheel spin. I start with making a roof that's as big as the floor. I make it out of cobblestone because I know I'm going to add some slabs beneath them anyway, so this won't be visible to people using the machine. After this, I add 2 more rows on the left side so we have some extra space. We don't want people to be able to reactivate the machine while it's running, because that would make it possible to manipulate your chances of winning. That's why the button signal needs to pass an RS NOR latch. We then use the latch to power a torch repeater clock with 1 extra tick of delay, which we will use to let the wheel spin. Let's add some temporary buttons to test the current build. It seems to work, but as you can see, it will keep spinning forever. That's why we need a randomizer that will deactivate the wheels one by one. We can make one by using the fact that a dropper spits out one of its items at random. If we fill it with items with different stack sizes, we can let it drop its items in another container that we then read out with a comparator. This will power the comparator with different degrees at random. I chose to have 3 single stack items and 3 16 stack items, but you can play around with this. For example, if you want the machine to spin longer, you can remove a single stack item and replace it with a 64 stack. We now use the comparator signal to deactivate the wheels by using sticky pistons as signal blockers. The first one needs a weaker signal, so it'll deactivate after just a few items have left the dropper. The middle one requires a little more, and then the last one requires the strongest signal. This way they'll always stop spinning from left to right. We'll use the same signal strength as the final piston as the reset signal for the RS NOR latch, so it can be reused. We then add a piece of redstone wire that blocks the hopper as long as the wheels are spinning, so it keeps its items until they're done. Now let's see it in action. The wheels do in fact stop one by one, after which the RS NOR latch gets reset. Now let's connect the reset signal to the top of the vertical AND gate from earlier, so we get the desired effect of reading out the machine once the wheels have stopped spinning. I use the sticky piston technique for some of the vertical redstone. Now let's add a payment barrel. I like to rename it using an anvil so it's clear for the user what they need to pay. I let it feed into a hopper that I'll use to create a filter so only diamonds can be used to play. I then let that hopper feed into a hopper line that goes into the winning dropper, so it won't run out of diamonds, because I've designed the prize pool in a way that the casino wins 12 diamonds on average every 100 games. Now let's make it into an actual filter. I fill the hopper with 18 diamonds and 4 randomly renamed items, so only those will get through. We want to start a game whenever a diamond gets through, so I tap off the filter signal and bring it all the way to the top to use as the set signal of the RS NOR ledge. This time I use the transparent block tower as a way of vertical redstone. When filming this, I accidentally left a block of cobblestone, but you'll see me remove it later in the video. Now let's go back to the payment barrel, so we can add an item blocker, since we only want one diamond to go through at a time. We also don't want the user to lose diamonds if they accidentally press the button again when the game is already going on. So I add another signal that blocks the hopper while the game is running. Now let's fix two little mistakes. We remove the cobblestone block that blocks the glass tower and add a piece of redstone to make the first triple AND gate work. To make sure the medium payment works, I let it block the low payment using a sticky piston. Now for some finishing touches, I add node blocks to the feed tapes. I put them on top of emerald blocks to get a digital sound, but gold blocks also work really well to get a slot machine-like feeling. I like the sounds to go a bit back and forth, so I add a fourth node block that gets activated first. I recommend you use a major triad as the nodes. Here are some examples on screen, but the basic gist is you choose a starting node, you then press the second one 4 more times, then you press the third one an additional 3 times, and finally you press the last one 5 times on top of that. If you only want to use 3 node blocks, I recommend you don't use the second one. Now let's add a node block that dings whenever a player wins. I let an observer watch the payout dropper, which I use to activate a node block on top of a gold block. I like the sound of a C, so I press it 6 times, but you can pick whichever you like. I then add a chest to collect excess diamonds for the casino. Now we just add some walls and a ceiling to hide the redstone. I use map images on an item frame to show the prize pool, but you can also use something like item frames or signs, or even a combination. That's it, we're done! I hope you learned something, and if you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments. Downloading the world map or schematic is always another option if you're struggling to understand a certain part. Now that I mention it, in the world map is also a quick play slot machine that works similarly and looks like this. I won't be giving a step-by-step tutorial of this, but if you guys really want, just let me know.